Hello, everybody, and welcome to my review of Stranger Things Season 2. As you may or may not be able to tell, I am a huge fan of Season 1. I love what the Duffer Brothers were able to do with that season number 1, with the young actors, the ensemble of young actors that has now grown to gain so much fame across the world, honestly. What they were able to do with their performances, and as well as, we get to see some new faces like David Harbour, as well as some returning faces like Winona Ryder. So what that season number 1 was able to do is, I think, something that has, of course, grown into what is now known as a global phenomenon, and I think it is really interesting. And I was really excited personally to see how can you top that season, and were the Duffer Brothers able to top that season? Well, in my opinion, no, but we still get an extremely entertaining new season of television. I'm going to start by talking about the things that I really liked about Stranger Things Season 2, and there's a lot to love in this season. Of course, we can't start off as a discussion about Stranger Things without talking about nostalgia, which is one thing that the Duffer Brothers have based this show upon. And what I was scared of going into the second season is that the show will rely solely on nostalgia and references to the 80s for the only main hook and substance of the show, and thankfully, that does not happen whatsoever. This show works very well on its own without all that nostalgia. I think that's just a plus that we get, just like season 1, that was a plus that we got. In season 2, the show also relies on the meaty substances of the show and the themes and the characters rather than that nostalgic feeling, although that nostalgic feeling is an addition. And as for the nostalgia in season 2, you get a lot more of it than season 1, but that never affected the show for me personally, and I really enjoyed actually seeing those kind of nostalgic tidbits and Easter eggs. And for people who lived in that era or were kids in that era, I'm sure they're going to have a great time just enjoying what they're seeing on screen. I know for a fact that a lot of cast members, the adult cast members on the show, when they came on set, they saw little details from the 80s that they kind of subconsciously knew about but never realized they were there, and they'd go on set and be like, oh wow, there's that one thing, just small details. And I really like that the Duffer Brothers pay that much attention to the small details in creating that environment for the show. In terms of sci-fi in the show, they really go all in with the sci-fi. And as a big sci-fi nerd, I just love seeing when the directors and the creators of the show and the producers are all putting in the time and effort to create something that is honestly, truly fun to watch. And you can see that effort go in, and you can see that they're having fun with the material since they respect the material from which this is based. I am, of course, talking about Stephen King, Steven Spielberg, the people who inspired Stranger Things. And you can see that they have drawn a lot of inspiration from that, but they've made it their own, and they're having a lot of fun with it. And they're wanting the audiences to have a lot of fun with it. And when a director and when creators come together and collaborate on something that they're enjoying making and want the audience to enjoy, that's visible. And I see that in Stranger Things Season 1, and it becomes even more visible to me personally in Stranger Things Season 2. So I love what the Duffer Brothers and all the creators and directors that come on each episode do with the material. They always provide something fresh from basically what is technically recycled material. It's not like this is the first time we've seen stuff about other dimensions or 80s sci-fi movies. We've seen that kind of stuff before, but they always give it a new, fresh angle. They draw from their inspirations, they respect their inspirations, and they bring something new to the table every single time. And that's what I think is one of the major reasons that we keep coming back to this show so often. So once again, season 2 is successful in that. And not only that, I think that the environment that the creators bring to not only season 1 but also season 2 is both very consistent and very effective. Even in terms of music, I love the music in season 1, but I love the music in season 2 even more, and they just keep upping the level of environment that they're creating for this show. And just, as I already mentioned, putting those little 80s Easter eggs and ultimately creating an environment where it's both mysterious and also familiar. And I think that's something that the creators of Stranger Things have done a really good job with. Also, in terms of special effects, I thought the special effects in the first season were slightly cheesy, and thankfully, because the show was so popular, maybe they got more funds or whatever it was, I think that the special effects have drastically improved from season 1, and that just helps you bring you in the show even more, and become more enveloped in these characters, and we have a good production value and people who are putting thought and effort into that production, and that really pays off. But ultimately, I think the most important thing about this newly discovered Stranger Things culture, as you might call it, and just Stranger Things in general, and especially for season two, is ultimately it comes down to the characters at the heart of the show. I think that despite all the faults of the season, which we will get into, because there are a few faults that I have with this season, and they're quite a bit more than season one. What keeps the show going and what keeps the show honestly really grounded is its characters, and its characters are played by actors. Now, not only do you have to write good characters, but you got to get good actors to play those characters. Now, in season one, we were all surprised to see this very talented medley, ensemble, whatever you want to call it, of young actors. And I think all of us can agree that we were most of us were mostly taken away by Millie Bobby Brown's performance as 11 in season one. Now, for me personally, I think that the adults also do a very good job in this show, and they act as very good supporting characters. Not only are the adults in the show very well written, but they're also, the actors playing them are doing a great job. Of course, we can't forget Winona Ryder gave such a, honestly, off the hooks, crazy, almost insane performance as this crazy mother almost in the first season, but yet it feels very nuanced and controlled, and I think that's hats off to Winona for doing such a great job. And here the characters are again very well written for the adults, especially David Harbour as Jim Hopper. He does a really good job of making his character slightly more grounded than season one. So as an actor, he's done a good job, as well as the writers who wrote that character have done a really good job. And the show's characters just begin to flesh out more and more every time I'm coming to a new episode, and it really works, especially for the adult characters. Personally, my favorite character, and I will say this is very controversial since I know a lot of you have different favorite characters, is Steve, and I think Joe Carey does a really good job of bringing a sense of charm to that character, and he ended up being my favorite character. That said, I think that the standout performance in season 2 doesn't come from 11 this time. Instead, it comes from Will Byers. Now, Will Byers is played by Noah Schnapp. He was barely in the first season. He's way more focused in the second season, and I'll keep this review spoiler-free, by the way, for those of you who are very lazy and haven't seen it yet, because I was lazy to even finish this review. So you probably have seen it now, but I'll keep it spoiler-free. And basically, Noah Schnapp brings something to Will that I didn't expect in season 1. I mean, we're ending with this cliffhanger in season 1, and we expect something to happen to his character, but the amount of depth, level, and performance level nuance that Noah Schnapp brought to his character was something that I think is almost Emmy-worthy. It is Emmy-worthy. There's particular dialogues, particular scenes that are so riveting, so haunting because of his personal performance, and give the show the sense of life it needed. It invigorates the show. And even though his character is going through a lot of trauma in this season, he really is one of the major lifelines of this show. And I was really taken away by his performance. It was just amazing this time around. And I think he did better than Millie Bobby Brown as 11. And not just because of the character, but actually as a performance, I think he outdoes her, in my opinion. That said, Millie Bobby Brown is still one of the best young performers that I've seen ever. So to top her is really something, and she still does a very excellent job in season 2 as being, that kind of level of awesome, crazy character that she brings. And also the writers did a good job of fleshing her out a little bit more, although I do have some qualms with her writing that we'll get into a little bit later. In terms of all the other kids, they do absolutely great. As usual, Finn Wolfhard does a good job, as well as the two others, Gaten Matarazzo, as well as the kid who plays Lucas, whose name I'm totally forgetting right now. But they all bring, that sense of character that you need, and ultimately that sense of chemistry between these kids that you need to keep the show running, and is the lifeline for the show. It's what keeps the show grounded, is these kids, their chemistry, and each actor brings their A game. I mean, even when I'm complimenting certain young actors over other young actors, they're all doing such a phenomenal job that it's really hard to pick one out from the others, but they all work together so well. They do individually, they do really good acting, and the characters are very well written, and they just keep getting more and more fleshed out. You get a better sense of these characters We also see some team ups between certain characters and gain chemistry among them, and the whole cast brings a very great sense of chemistry and groundedness in performance that I really haven't seen much in any other TV show or even film. So that is something they're doing excellently and helps keep the show really grounded despite its faults, which I'll get into again, as I said later. Sadie Sink is also a newcomer in here, and also the kid who plays her brother, whose name also I'm forgetting. But they all do a really, really good job of, especially her brother, the actor who plays her brother, brings this really unexpected menace to the show, which I really enjoy, and acts as a really good parallel to the real menaces of the show. So overall, as I said, the cast has done such a great job of creating a really good chemistry, and I'm really impressed by what they've been able to do with their performances. So with all of this going for season 2 and all these great positive points, what was it that made me personally think that season 1 was the better season? We get more characters, we get more special effects, they're better music, but ultimately it comes down to screenplay, especially for a TV show where you have to break down what you want to happen in every episode. And personally, I had a little bit of problems with the screenplay and writing of the actual plot of season 2. My biggest concern with season 2 is that the major strength of this show is the chemistry of the cast together. So it was weird to me that for the first 3 or 4 episodes, it kind of feels like every character is kind of going on their own side quest. And this kind of became a repetitive trend, and I began to feel that the show became a little, not necessarily just multifaceted, but very confused. The script began to be very confused about what it wanted to be. It kept sending these characters on different side quests. They do come together towards the end, but ultimately I felt like the show was weaker in the first half because those characters were not together. So I think that although the things that happen to these characters that they do on these quote-unquote side quests are important, I think it would have helped the show to keep these characters together instead of, having them do their separate things, because it makes the show feel very disjointed, and that's something that I don't want to see. And that became a serious problem after a while, especially when I came to episode 7. Now, episode 7 has grown to gain a lot of controversy, and I do see what the Duffer Brothers were trying to do with episode 7. And I'm not going to spoil anything about episode 7, but there's a character development for a certain character, and it takes a little too long. I mean, they had to dedicate a whole episode to get in just this easy bit of character development that honestly could have been done in a shorter amount of time. Now, I'm not saying that I hate that episode. I think there's some cool, visual elements to that episode. There's a lot to like about the episode, but personally, episode 7 just feels like it comes out of nowhere, and it was trying to do something. I can see their intent, but it just does not work. It didn't need a big episode. So in that kind of way, I think that the disjointedness of the season kind of keeps it from coming together. And that's a serious problem for the show, and especially when you compare it to season 1, where the show came together so well. The cast was working off of each other, which happens here too, but just less because the screenplay is so disjointed in the beginning. So that's kind of my little rant on why the show feels a little bit disjointed. Another major qualm I had with this season is that after a while, the season honestly begins to feel a little bit repetitive, and it kind of feels like the writers are having to make stuff up to keep the show relevant and engaging. Now, that said, there are a lot of amazing sequences in this, and I do love the story that Stranger Things is putting out here, and I like that world and everything. But it feels like the writers get a little bit lazy from time to time in season 2, especially in a couple episodes. It feels like they're having to make up plot points to try and connect the dots, and it's very visible and it's very obvious. And that was a really, really, really low point for me in the show, is when it's very visible and obvious to me personally as a viewer, where the writers are trying to make up small little plot points to help connect everything, and it keeps the show from coming together. And especially again with the disjointed screenplay with all these characters doing the different things, plus this, the show just doesn't feel like it comes together until the last few episodes, when I was like, okay, now this is the kind of Stranger Things that I wanted to see in season 2, just all through all the episodes, not just a couple of the last episodes. So for me, the show feels disjointed because the writers are seeming to make up stuff as it goes along. And that's an indication of poor writing or tired material. Now, I personally don't think that this is tired material. I mean, as we've said, we've seen stuff like this before. 80s movies, monsters. It's nothing new, but I think there's still stuff to be discovered with this, especially with the parallel dimension element, with the elements that Eleven brings to her character. There's a lot to be done with the show, but ultimately, what happens is that since they're trying to make up plot points, it kind of gives season 2 a sense of forgettableness that I really didn't want to have when I finished the show, because unlike season 1, which feels really weighty and feels new and fresh, season 2 feels like it's kind of following the exact formula of season 1 and doesn't explore enough new territory to make it interesting or fresh. So that is also kind of a major qualm, is that hopefully going into season 3, they try to bring in some new fresh perspectives into the show and fresh new angles. And I kind of see how they were trying to do that with episode 7, although that was a failed experiment. So I think it's going to take a little bit of experimentation within the writing to get to that point. But I think that you have this great material, and there's so much to be explored and discovered with this material, with the characters along with them. I think there's a lot to still be seen in the show, and I don't want the writing to kill the show. And I feel like season 2's writing was weaker than season 1's, and that's kind of why I say season 1 was better for me than season 2, is because the writing just feels a little like we're making it up as we go, and we're making different plot points, and we're trying to connect it all together, but it never comes together the way that season 1 did, which had very tight, strong writing. So I'm hoping that the writers understand this and understand the significance and like the great basically material that they have and what they can do with it. Now, again, I think that season 2 is a great season. There are some great visual sequences. There are some great performances. But as I said, the plot just doesn't come together. So that's one of my other major qualms about the show. But despite all of its faults, Stranger Things season 2 is a rollicking good time, mostly because of its characters, its excellent performances, amazing environment that they create, this world that they've created. These characters ultimately, I think, is the number one thing. We've grown to love them in season 1, and they continue to keep on fleshing these characters out and create relationships within the cast of characters. I just love that about the show, and the fact that it's set in a sci-fi world with monsters and stuff. I just love seeing that a show with a sci-fi show can have such great heart and relationships and characters in the middle of it. Stranger Things season 2 is a great season of television. As I said, though, the writing is a little weak and it needs work for real. So hopefully they'll be able to improve that in season 3, but I liked season 2. I'm going to give it an A-. It's a really enjoyable season of TV, and I hope you guys check it out if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do all those fine things. I'll have more reviews out coming for you guys soon.